border war. Fans called it Moonshine Throwdown. I think that's the best rivalry name, an unofficial name, but the best rivalry name I've come across.
Yeah, unofficial that should become official soon enough.
Embrace it.
Throws deep downfield for the end zone, a lunging catch, and it's a score for the Herd, Jerron Woodyard. And it is 37-0, and Grant Wells is moving up toward a 300-yard passing performance in the first half. That is his 4th touchdown toss.
Story toward Jackson, got separation to the 20, to the 10, and he will go. Lucky Jackson from 54 yards out.
Pressure off the edge. Screen delivers. What a catch, Levias, who brings it in. Armani Levias to the house. Touchdown, Marshall.
This will be from 52 yards from the far hash mark. John Haggerty, the punter, will hold. Jared Nash will snap it. It's definitely long enough. Unbelievable. The true freshman, Corey Munson, hammers it home from 52 yards.
Welcome back to the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. Rough week of football this weekend for Marshall fans. The Herd had it all in front of them. Conference title game at home. Everybody was basically back. All of the usual suspects that Marshall needed to be on the field were on the field and available for the game. They had all the, it all lined up for them, and it just couldn't get going. I don't really know where to go from that. It just never got going for the Herd. UAB had a game plan. Props to them. They came in with a plan. They executed their plan, and it worked. And we talked about, John Duncan and I talked about what we thought each team needed to do, and what we thought each team needed to do was basically the same thing. They needed to play decent defense. They needed to have the run game get going, and they just kind of needed to slug it out and see who ultimately would come out with a win. And UAB did that. I mean, they did that. So at the end of the day, it was UAB 22, Marshall 13. UAB hoists their second Conference USA trophy in just 4 years after the program was eliminated. Marshall is now 1-2 in Conference USA championship games. And this was the first home loss for the Marshall in a title game since 1995. That's pre-FBS era. That was the 1AA national championship game. Marshall lost at Jones C. Edwards Stadium, and they didn't lose again in a championship capacity until this past Friday night. So and there were a lot of games that had been played over the course of that past few years. So this wasn't like it was 1 or 2 games, and that was it. I got Trace with me. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But we'll see what we can get going. Cooper just pod bombed the podcast as per scheduled tweet. So hang with us there, and we'll see. Well, okay. Jennifer came and rescued us. I don't have to take a break to get him out of here. All right, Trace is with me. Let's talk about it. Trace, give me initial reactions. We'll talk about stats and everything. This was just an ugly game, period. Marshall had a lot of first defensively that was allowed, and there were a lot of other things that I'll get into specifically, but you were at the game. You sat there and froze your butt off and watched the effort. And again, before we get into this, look, I don't know why we always have to say this, but I always have to say this because we have things and feelings and the way things worked out. It doesn't mean that we're not fans of these players. Okay. So many of you people go there and it's like, well, you guys just hate on the team. No, we don't hate on the team. But when you lose, there are things and ways that people are going to feel, and it doesn't mean that you're not fans of the players. Okay, it means that you're not necessarily a fan of the execution or the game plan or how the game played out. So pump the freaking brakes and deal with a little bit of criticism because it's justified. So with that being said, Trace, what are your initial thoughts on the Conference USA title game?
Well, to be honest, my initial thoughts were I was more embarrassed than anything else. Like, that was the first game in a long time that I've actually genuinely been embarrassed because, like, you're literally letting another team celebrate a championship on your home field. That's embarrassing. That is extremely embarrassing. I mean, this collapse right here, like this late season collapse that Marshall's been on this year is just it really backs up everybody that thinks it's time to move on from Doc. This is why right here. I mean, this is why. At what point is all this too much? At what point do you say, okay, this can't continue. We can't keep doing this. I don't care if they have winning records. I don't care if they play in freaking Mobile, Alabama in the Camellia Bowl every year. I don't care. Like, who cares about that? At what point do you say, enough with the winning record talk, enough with all of that? You have to win the games that matter. You have to win conference titles. At what point do you say, okay, we got to move on? Because I feel like I don't see how you, at this point, I mean, yeah, Marshall's playing with a freshman quarterback and they're playing in a COVID year, but you don't just go from 7-0 looking dominant to losing your next 2 games in a row at home. Sorry, no, there's more to it than that. That is the definition of a late season collapse, and that's what Doc Holliday teams have done in the last several years. I actually looked it up earlier today. I looked up Marshall's combined records in November and December since 2014 when they won the Conference USA title. Since then, their combined records in November and December are 14-13. Great coaches and great coach teams don't go 500 in November and December for 5 or 6 straight years. They just don't. Sorry. It doesn't happen. Great coaches don't lose 20-0 at home to Rice. I mean, come on. Like, I don't care that he won whatever little coach of the year thing that was. I don't know anything about it. I don't care. Great coaches win conference titles. Great coaches don't have late season collapses every freaking year. I don't give a crap what anybody says. That's unacceptable. It's literally unacceptable. The coaching was downright atrocious in this game. I purposely did not tweet anything about this game for this reason, so I could say everything on here. I purposely did that because I just was not feeling. I would have absolutely probably through Twitter fingers, I would have tried to slit someone's throat if I had tried to get in an argument with somebody on Twitter. It wouldn't have ended well. So I saved myself from that purposely so I could get my thoughts out on here. So you know what? I'm just so over all of this.
Well, I think this is slightly worse than what we've seen the season or two before that, where you're in the driver's seat and you shoot yourself in the foot so that you can't make it to a title game. This is worse because you did enough to get there. Look, Marshall slid into the conference title game. They were kind of on the ropes a little bit, and the game with Charlotte getting canceled backed them into the conference title game. Now, nobody's going to say that they didn't deserve to be there. Their record said that they did,
right?
But the last 2 games are just really worrisome, and it looks like the recipe now to beat Marshall is exactly what everybody was boasting as their biggest strength all year long, and that was run defense. In the last 2 weeks, the last 2 games, teams have had a game plan to commit to the run no matter what, and it worked. In the last 2 games, we saw Marshall against Rice finally give up over 100 yards rushing to a team for the first time in the season, and they lost. And this past weekend against UAB, we saw them give up their first 100-yard rusher on the season, and they lost the game. So this is the recipe. They're running right at Marshall, daring them to stop us. If we're going to run it 40 times, then we're going to beat you. And that seems like what is happening, because that's basically what has happened. So let's talk about indicators. Total yardage, time of possession, first downs, turnovers. I mean, it is mind-boggling, the time of possession. I thought it was bad against Rice. It's worse against UAB. So total yards, 468 to 268 in favor of UAB. Time of possession is eye-openingly, mind-bogglingly crazy. 41 minutes, 26 seconds for UAB, 18 minutes, 34 seconds for Marshall, plus 23 minutes for UAB in time of possession. How can you win with that type of time deficit? That is amazing. And still it was only in, 9-point loss. I mean, wow. 21 first downs to 10 for Marshall, and turnovers tied 1-1. Of course, the one turnover was Xavier Gaines' interception at the end of the half. It really didn't matter, but so what? Like I said, a couple of just bullet point things. UAB, 216 total rushing yards as a team, highest on the season allowed by Marshall. Spencer Brown, 30 carries, 149 yards, highest allowed by Marshall in the season. Like I said before, the first home loss in a title game since 1995. Pre-FBS era, Marshall lost its final 2 games off of 2020. This is just kind of scary, the trend. And now we've learned that we'll talk about later. They're paired against Buffalo in a bowl game, which is exactly what Buffalo does well, is run the football. They've got one of the absolute best offensive lines and running backs in the country. If I were Marshall right now on the heels of what's going on with the game only being, 5 days away, I'd be a little concerned about this matchup. I would be a little concerned. And this is the first opponent to score 21 points against Marshall, and they lost 22 points. So that's kind of also scary to think that Marshall only gave up 22 points as a high on the season, and they lost the game. So stats-wise, we wondered how Grant Wells would bounce back after the 5-interception game, and to the tune of interceptions, he bounced back in a big way. He had none. But to the tune of being able to complete passes, man, this was like the second worst thing that could happen to throwing a bunch of interceptions. What do you start? 0 of 10, 0 of 11, didn't complete a pass in the first half. I mean, you can't make that up. That's crazy. Nobody can foresee stuff like that happening. So 8 of 23 on the day, 138 yards, 2 touchdowns is a little deceiving, but he did have the 2 touchdowns. Brendan Knox, 17 carries, just 67 yards. Still no commitment to Brendan Knox, the biggest weapon on the team. They still did not commit to him like UAB did Spencer Brown. Artie Henry, leader in the clubhouse in receptions with 3 for 18 yards and a touchdown. Xavier Gaines, leader in the clubhouse with yardage, 1 reception for 70 yards. Beautiful ball, by the way. Beautiful play. I'm not going to knock Wells for that one because we've seen wide open receivers just not be hit in years past. So good play there by those guys. And then another 4 rushes for 22 yards for Xavier, and he actually threw the ball. So like I said, 0 of 1 with an interception. Let's talk about some things surrounding this Marshall offense, Trace. Number one, right out of the gate, I've got to talk to you about play calling because it just seemed, I don't know what was going on there. I don't know how many drives in a row it started out with a pass, an incomplete pass. Then it was almost predictable. It was pass, run, pass, punt, pass, run, pass, punt. That's what it was. And I thought early on I had talked about this going into the game in the previews. Like if Wells isn't feeling it, then they'll probably just start handing the ball off to Knox more. And they didn't do that. They just didn't do that. They stuck with Wells. So, okay, there's something to be said for that, but okay. But if it's not working, they went from not committing to Knox when it wasn't working to pulling Grant Wells and putting in Xavier Gaines because it wasn't working. Totally head scratching. So let's talk first about the play calling, and then we'll talk about the weird use of Xavier Gaines. So go.
Well, it wasn't good. It was bad, really. I mean, and that's a couple of things really stand out in my mind. Like you said, the lack of commitment to the run. I mean, why? Why would you, when the guy literally can hit a pass, literally did not hit a pass in the first half? I don't give a crap if you're only running for 2 yards of play. Run the freaking ball. Like, you weren't completing a pass. He wasn't even on target on most of the passes in the first half. Like, you have to try to run the ball more than that. Especially when you look at the other side and you see Spencer Brown have 30 carries. I mean, you would have liked to have seen Brendan Knox have 25 plus, 30 carries or whatever. So, I mean, that was bad in its own right. Then a couple things that I remember specifically. On one of those series when they had Xavier Gaines in there and like they were actually trying to move the ball a little bit when he was running the Wildcat stuff, and they had it down to a 3rd down, you bring Wells back in the game. At that point, it's like, all right, well, they know they're going to throw the ball here because it's freaking blatantly obvious because you're bringing Grant Wells back in the game. Right. And this is right when they were moving the ball with Xavier Gaines. You should have just kept him in there, and instead what happens, he throws an incomplete pass, and it's 4th down. I mean, that was literally embarrassingly predictable because you know that they're going to throw the ball if they're bringing him back in there like that. So that was terrible. And then one other moment, late in the first half, UAB had pinned Marshall back pretty deep, and this was towards the very end of the half. They literally let Grant Wells throw the ball, and it almost got picked off. Like, they literally could have lost the game right there. Just trash coaching. I mean, literally, high school coaches know better than that. It was embarrassingly bad. So it is atrocious. And, like, that's the thing, is that the offense had been so much better than it has been for several years up until the last 2 games. And because of the last 2 games, they're basically just maybe a tick above what they've been the last few years. They were so much ahead of those teams the last few years offenses, and now they're basically right on level with them. Like, it doesn't even – and Grant Wells' numbers, I'm sure, about – well, mostly of them are probably right about where they have been for the quarterback averages over the last few years since Cato. So, like, any positive momentum they had offensively got shot out of hell on that last 2 games. So, I mean, it's just extremely disappointing, to say the least.
I mean, I agree with you. I was sitting there watching the game, and it was just, if I'm not a football guru, but if I can sit on my couch and I know what plays, I mean, I don't know exactly the particular play, but I can tell you by watching that game, well, this is going to be a run. Well, that's going to be a pass. It was just extremely predictable. And if guys that get compensated really well to coach football can't figure that out, then I don't know what's going on here, because me as a fan sitting on the couch could figure it out. UAB's coaches could figure it out, and they did. So it's just I don't know how to, put an excuse to it, but it was weird. It was just weird. Like, you have a great offensive line, you have a great stable of running backs, and several wide receivers that you could also try to get out on the edge or something like that. And still, we tried to see Marshall complete these intermediate to long passes, and it just didn't work. So, I mean, at some point, you just got to get out of your own way and hand the ball off. Like, let's try to get something. And I agree with you. Bringing in Grant Wells there at a 3rd down, Xavier Gaines had him moving the ball, and it's like,
terrible.
What? I don't get that. And it reminds me of a few years ago when Western and Marshall played on 75 week, and Mike Sanford, out of nowhere, Steven, I'm sure, remembers this, out of nowhere, they pull like Mike White out of the game or something like that, and they put in Drew Eccles for a play or two, and it goes nowhere, stifles the drive, and kills the momentum, and the Toppers had the punt or something. I mean, it was just wild, crazy stuff. I don't understand. It's not, again, we don't know all the intricacies of the Herd offense, and we're not trying to pile on here, but if it's not working, why don't you just put the ball into the gut of your best player and see if you can just get something going? If you can get the defense, if you can get the defense to start taking a step back or so, or taking, or maybe creeping up for the run so that you might have a better open look or something. But man, it just didn't work. And let's talk about the use of Xavier Gaines. All year long, we've been talking about him being vastly underutilized, vastly not nearly as big of a part as the offense. And man, it's like they specifically looked at us and goes, all right, you guys want to see Xavier Gaines? Well, here you go. We'll just shove him down your throat for this game. It seemed like every play was, every pass play early on was a target towards him, like to him. Great. I like to see that. But if you're only throwing to the one guy, well, the defense is going to pick up on that as well. And it's great we finally got to see him behind center or, at quarterback, and it's provided a little bit of a spark, but I don't, it seemed like there was a definite, like, all right, we got to figure out something to work like right now. And let's try this. Okay. That's not, well, let's try this. All right. Well, that's not working. Well, let's try this. I don't know what the game plan was, but it surely wasn't to give the ball to the best, your best back. So, I'm sure you like to see in Xavier Gaines, you get utilized differently in different positions. It's great, but talk to me a little bit more about the overall usage and how he was mixed in. And I mean, I don't know. I don't know. What do you got?
Well, I mean, during the game, and I think we pretty much everybody I sit with and that's around me at the games, we say it every game. He's been underutilized. I think he's been underutilized for 4 freaking years. I mean, yeah. I think the guy literally should be like to the caliber of like a conference MVP type caliber player or like offensive player of the year. I think he's that kind of a talent, and yet Marshall and he's down to this last game, has still yet to really figure out how to use the guy to his full potential. I mean, you got him at tight end. Okay, that's fine. He gets 2 or 3 catches a game or so. And then you bring him in for the Wildcat formation. That's fine. That's not really going to go anywhere more than 5 to 10 yards a play. And then, I mean, I just don't understand how you haven't utilized that guy more. And, like, at this point of the season, he should have been utilized. Whatever he was doing in this UAB game, he should have been doing a lot of that much more than he has been all the previous 7 or 8 games.
Right.
So, like, they waited till the last because they were desperate. Like you said, it was all just a desperation ploy. It wasn't even necessarily because they were trying to utilize him. It was just because they were desperate to try to move the ball. And, like, that was the only time that he really gets any kind of legit chance out there to show what he's capable of doing. I mean, I'm not saying that, like, he hasn't had a great career or a really good career or, whatever, because he has. It's just it should have been better than it's been. And that is directly on the coaching. On the coaching. His
touches and opportunities to make more plays should have been there for the last 3 or 4 years.
Yes.
But look, the O-line was back at full strength. So there's no excuse there to not commit to the run. We thought that was what the problem was, when Rice played Marshall, but everybody was back. Starting 5 was back, and I don't know. So enough with the offense. It was just terrible. 13 points in a championship game at home is not going to win you a ball game, obviously. So let's move along to defense. Of course, we talked about how many yards that UAB racked up, 468 yards of offense. They held the ball for over 41 minutes. I mean, it's not surprising that a lot of guys had a lot of tackles for Marshall because they just could not get off the field. Najee Johnson, 13 tackles, 4 solo. Tavante Beckett, 13 tackles, 2 solo, and a quarterback hurry. Eli Neal, 12 tackles, 1 solo, half a sack, half a tackle for loss, a quarterback hurry, and a fumble recovery. And Darius Hodge, 11 tackles, half a sack, half a tackle for loss. 4 guys with over 10 tackles. And by the way, Derek Pitts had 9. So you almost have 5 guys with 10 tackles on the day. I mean, amazing the amount of tackles that these guys had to play. I mean, it's again, we're going to say it again that, the defense they got gashed on the ground. There's no denying that. They allowed big pass plays to happen specifically on 3rd down, which were absolute killers. So that doesn't get you off the field. And to still only hold UAB to 22 points is pretty amazing, given the fact that it's plus 23 in time of possession. I mean, they're just being asked to do too much. So coupled with the fact that they were a little bit softer, not as stingy as they were in previous games, and the fact that they were just constantly on the field, you're asking those guys to just do too much. I mean, period. You're asking them to do too much. So what do you got for this defense? I mean, what can you say?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was the quote unquote, worst might be, it was the worst defensive performance of the year. Worst might not be the best word for it, but like based on how it's been this year, it was the worst defensive performance all year. But it wasn't, and it was not all on the defense at all. I mean, yeah, UAB kind of beat them up on the line of scrimmage, which I didn't expect. And those 2 running backs really did a number on them. I mean, it seems like, I don't know how many times in this game, it seems like every time they got hit, they did not go down on the first hit. That's a credit to UAB. They got some really good players. Spencer Brown especially, great running back. I mean, you could just see that it just looked like every time he got hit, or even the McBride, the freshman behind him, every time he got hit, he bounced forward and got an extra couple of yards at least. I mean, there's a lot of missed tackles in this game, and a lot of that isn't all. A lot of that's not just on the defense. A lot of that's because UAB's running backs played really well. I mean, at the same time, yeah, like you said, I mean, they only gave up 22 points and 41 minutes of time of possession. UAB was on the field. I mean, that's insane. I don't know if I've ever seen a game 41 minutes to 18 in time of possession. I can't remember any off the top of my head, put it that way. So, I mean, the fact that they only gave up 22 points in that situation is pretty daggone good. I mean, yeah, the UAB had a lot of success offensively, but they only scored 22 points. And if Marshall's defense would have been on the field, say 10 or 15 minutes less than that, UAB probably would have only scored 14 points or something. It probably would not have been as much as it was. So, I mean, the defense, was not exactly great, and you could say they were, okay, pretty good maybe, but they certainly did not lose in the game. And if it wasn't for the defense, then they would have been completely out of it. I mean, completely out of it. It was 9. They only had allowed 9 points through, the first 2.5 to 3 quarters. I mean, that kept Marshall in the game, and offense did a little bit there in the second half, but I mean, you have to. This loss is solely on the offense. I mean, point blank, it is. It's not on the defense. So,
yeah, I mean, so that's 2 games in a row that we can chalk the losses up to the lack of offensive production and turnovers. So in the last 2 games, Marshall is now minus 36 minutes in time of possession. So better than a half of football, the defense has been on the field longer than the offense has. It's just not going to win you any games. But again, shout out to UAB. You got to give them credit. They got good players. They had a good game plan. They've got a good coaching staff. They put it all together, and they came into Huntington, and they got their first ever win at Jones C. Edwards Stadium and captured a Conference USA title. And you said that before. That's what good coaches do. They have a good game plan, and they execute that game plan, and they out-prepare and out-execute their opponent. And that's what UAB did against Marshall. There's just no two ways about it. So, you can take that as, piling on the herd if you want to, but look, UAB is a good team. They won, right? They came up in a cold game, miserable game, and beat Marshall in their house, period. Let's talk about some grades, Trace. I'm sure we won't have much to talk about here, but let's get through it. Quarterbacking?
Well, it's not quite as bad as it was last week, but I gave him an F. So yeah, it was an F minus, but so now it's just an F. But I mean, what can you even? I mean, what really can you give him when he's 0 for 10 in the first half? I mean, there's nothing else. There's nothing you can do. I mean, but here, I mean, the thing is, I will give him this much. I mean, 0 for 10 in the first half, ended up 8 of 13 for 138 in the second half. So that's not bad. I mean, that's pretty good in the second half, but like 0 for 10, I mean, and it's not, that's the thing. 0 for 10 in the first half, and he literally was playing with absolutely no confidence whatsoever. Like none. His body language, it was just, he had the yips like I've never seen anybody have in a long time. I mean, and that's the thing is that it was predictable. It would be like a quick, maybe 3-step drop. He'd look at one receiver and one receiver only, and then throw to that receiver. Gains, yes. Or it would be somebody else. Like he literally did not look off anybody else. It was just 3-step drop, quick release, throw it to one guy, and he eyeballs the guy the whole time. I mean, that's not a recipe for success. And UAB's defense is too good for that to work. I mean, you can sniff that out easily. But I mean, he did have 2 touchdowns in the second half, no interceptions, which was good. I mean, the 33.5 QBR is bad, but I mean, if he would have had, I mean, even if he would have just completed, I don't know, maybe 5 balls in the first half, Marshall could have freaking probably won the game. I mean, it was 9-7 in the third quarter, and they were down 2 points in the fourth quarter. It was 15-13. So, I mean, as much as we're saying how bad things were, they were down 2 points in the third, late in the fourth quarter. They were down 2 points, and they had UAB at 3rd and 5. So, I mean, they easily could have won the game, but it falls on Grant Wells, but it has to do more in the first half. You can't go 0 for 10 in the first half. So, I mean, he might have redeemed himself a little bit in the second half, but that first half was just too bad to overcome. So, got to be an F.
Yeah, I look at things like, you make a completion here or a completion there, you pick up another first down here or another first down there, and that shrinks the time of possession considerably, because that's another 2 or 3 minutes you're most likely going to be on the field, which is another 2 or 3 minutes of football time that your defense will get to rest and be on the sideline. And, if enough of those plays string together, well, it eliminates a possession for UAB potentially, and maybe that's one that they scored on. But you just never know. You never know. But there's no way you can go, 0 for in the first half and most likely expect to win the game. Yet Marshall was really close to being able to pull that off. Offensively, again, well below the season average, abysmal first down ratio, better than 2-1. It's just not much to be happy about, really. The play to Xavier Gaines was about the best play of the day. It's about the only thing that Marshall had going for him, really. So what do you got for the offense?
Yeah, abysmal is the correct word. I gave him a D. And the only reason I give him a D is because the second half they actually did put up 13 points. That's the only reason I give him a D. It would have easily been an F or even an F minus had they not done that. But, I mean, 13 points, that's not going to get it done by any stretch of the imagination. 268 total yards, not going to get it done. Only 10 first downs, certainly not going to get it done. 2 of 12 on third down, terrible. They had the turnover, which that throw from Xavier Gaines, that was pretty much at that point that was pretty much a punt. Like it didn't matter,
right?
Like it was irrelevant. But like it still counts as a turnover. And then the fact that they had probably good. I mean, they probably had more 3 and outs in this game than they had first downs. I mean, I don't know the number, but like and that led to a minus 23 minute time of possession differential. I mean, 23 minutes? Are you freaking kidding me? Like, how do you expect to win a game like that? And then the thing is that they didn't try to really establish the run that much, but they averaged almost 5 yards a carry as a team. I mean, that's the thing. It just makes even less sense. It's like, okay, you're averaging almost 5 yards a pop as a team running the ball. So naturally, let's try to throw it 20, 30 times with the guy that hasn't hit a pass in a whole half, because that just makes so much sense. This defense or offensive performance was bad, but I mean, even at that, it was, like I said, a 2-point game in the fourth quarter. And if Marshall would have got off the field on that 1 3rd down where they had that crazy long freaking touchdown happen, if Marshall would have got off the field right there, I think the offense could have went down and scored and took the lead. But you know what? You got to do more in the first half. So give them a D.
Yeah. It was all right there for them. They just did not make enough plays. 3rd down killed them. 3rd down defense just killed them. So leading into the defense, what do you got for those guys this week?
Yeah, I gave him a B-. I mean, it's the worst grade I've given him all year, but it's still a pretty decent grade. I mean, it gave up 22 points, which is certainly enough to still win the game if the offense does anything, and they didn't. They didn't do anything in the first half. They allowed 468 total yards, which was a lot, but like they were on the field a crap ton, so you got to think about that. 216 yards rushing. Certainly did not see that coming. UAB really beat them up on the line of scrimmage. Offensive line, or UAB's, has really moved bodies. Those 2 running backs really did a number on them to the point where they hadn't had that happen anywhere near that all year. So got to give UAB credit there. A lot of credit goes there. They allowed 252 passing yards. The corners were in some bad positions. I mean, on that 1 3rd down where they let that big long touchdown happen at the end, that should have never happened. I mean, just some of those were just bad. Way too many 3rd downs. I mean, all game long, I feel like this defense, UAB, just kept converting 3rd downs. And like, it was so demoralizing because you were that close to getting off the field, and then they kept converting 3rd down. That was bad. And like, that ended up contributing to the loss. And then, I mean, they were on the field too long, though. I mean, above all else, they were on the field for 41 minutes. I mean, you're not going to win a game like that. So defense, was not great by any stretch of the imagination. But if you only give up 22 points, and with the offensive players that Marshall has, if you only give up 22 points defensively, Marshall should win that game. And they didn't, because the offense was so bad in the first half. So I'm going to give the defense a B-.
Yeah, fair enough. By the way, I looked it up while you were talking. 6 3-and-outs for the Herd in this game.
So it's almost 10.
Special teams, look, nobody really did anything of any consequence. So, what do you got? I mean, Lefevre had a pretty good day punting. That's about it. What do you got for the special teams?
Yeah, I'll give him a B. I mean, it was pretty good. It was all right. It's a pretty good day. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot to go off of, like you said. I mean, 0-0 on field goals, and he hit one extra point. And I mean, then there was no punt returns at all. 18 yards per kick return as a team, but Sheldon Evans did have that one really nice kick return that got him out to about the 40 or so. I think it was in the second half. I don't remember exactly when it was, but that was a nice kick return. Lefevre, 44 yards a punt, and that was really impressive because it was cold. It's probably like kicking a brick. It's like kicking a brick out there, bro. I mean, and he had to punt a whole lot more than usual with all the offensive ineptitude. So Lefevre, I mean, that was really good. He had a long of 52, so he really brought it this game. And really, if it wasn't for him punting the ball like that, I probably wouldn't have gave him this high of a grade because there just wasn't anything really to go on. So, like, just basically on the shoulders of Robert Lefevre having a really solid day, I'm going to give them special teams B.
Yeah, one thing I've got to talk about is a potential special teams play was the point in the game where Doc Holliday decided to pass on the field goal and go for it on 4th down inside the red zone. I don't hate that call, and I want to say that right now. I don't hate the fact that he went for that. So too often have we've gotten on Doc Holliday for not going for it in situations when we think that he should have. And of course, it was not executed. It was an incomplete pass, but I don't hate the fact that he decided to go, no, we need 6 right here. Let's go for it. We may not have a better opportunity, so let's do it. It's just unfortunate that it didn't happen. So that was late in the fourth quarter. Ultimately ended up being like Marshall's final possession or, pretty close to it. So it's a bummer, but hey, it is what it is. So coaching, ouch. What do you got for the coaching?
Ouch is correct. We'll go with an F- this week. I mean, the offense was an atrocity. The offensive play calling was atrocious. I mean, it just didn't make sense. I mean, we already said a lot of this even before this segment. I mean, like the fact that they didn't try to establish a run more than they did when they had a quarterback, not figuratively, literally couldn't complete a pass for 2.5 quarters, and you did not try to establish a run more than that. I mean, that's just completely on the coaching staff, completely on Cramsey and Doc. I mean, totally, it is. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're not. I mean, yeah, UAB was doing a pretty good job of stopping the run. But like I said, Marshall as a team still averaged almost 5 yards per carry as a team, and Brendan Knox averaged about 4 yards a carry himself, and like he didn't get nearly enough carries. I mean, just point blank, he didn't. And if they would have tried to push that effort a little bit more, and the run game had gotten going, that would have made life a whole lot easier on Grant Wells, because UAB probably would have, played towards the run a little bit more, and that could open up some guys deep or whatever. But like that was terrible. I mean, and then the whole Gaines situation, like I said, like Xavier Gaines was in there. He moved the ball pretty well, through the Wildcat stuff, and like he was moving the ball at times pretty good. But then on that third down, you take him out of the game, put Wells back in. Like that's just stupid. I mean, there's no point in the world to do that. I mean, I don't even remember what it was. It was like 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5, or something like that. Like they could have easily just kept Gaines in there, and they probably would have got the first down. But instead, they put Wells back in, and it throws in a complete pass or whatever. So I mean, just a terrible decision. I mean, and then like you said, and then I said it earlier, when they were at the very end of the first half, they almost blew the game right there, because they had him deep, pinned him deep, and Grant Wells, they decided to let him throw the ball there, and he almost threw a pick. And if UAB intercepts that ball and they have it inside the Marshall 20 or 15-yard line, and then they go up and they score a touchdown right there, and it's 16-0 at the half, you can put a fork in it. It would have been over at that point. So, I mean, that was a terrible decision. I mean, like I said, period, point blank, end of story. Great coaches win games like this. Great coaches don't get shut out at home the game before that. Great coaches don't lose 2 games at home in a row. Great coaches don't go 6 quarters without scoring, period. I mean, what else can you say? So, F-. Clearly, it's an F- game.
Well, there's a lot of low grades here. The special teams and defense really are the only things that can hope to bring it up. But, what do you got for the Herd in a I mean, they make it to a championship game, but they lose it. And that's almost as bad, if not worse, than not making it to the championship game. So what do you got for the overall grade for the Herd?
Yeah, overall D. I mean, needless to say, the poor performance, pretty much top to bottom. I mean, when the best grade's a B, and that's because of punting, then that pretty much says that it's not really the best day.
Didn't even think about that.
Yeah, I mean, when your best grade's a B and it's because of the punter, you didn't do a whole lot. So, I mean, it's not even, and it's like you said to start off the show or whatever earlier in the show. This isn't about us, saying we don't support the players, because I think flat out the players are just put in bad situations a lot, and that's what my problem is they're getting put in bad situations by guys that are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to put these players in the positions that they're in. So that's my problem. And that's a problem with a lot of the fan base. And I mean, June, all I'm saying, June of 2021, there's going to be a big decision have to be made. So, I mean, that's all I'm going to get into that right now, but it was a bad game. I mean, you can't, I don't care if you, I mean, yeah, us fans wanted to see Marshall get to the championship game. They got there at home against a team that they're better than, and they lost. I mean, that's what it amounts to. You can't have that. I mean, when you're at home like that, playing for a conference title, you have to take advantage of that. And I don't care if they got there. I don't care if they won their first 7 games. They lost the last 2, so they didn't win a championship. I mean, that's all you can say. I don't want to hear a single freaking word about next year. I don't want to hear hype about next year. I don't care. I'm sick of it. I don't care about next year. I'm tired of hearing the next year syndrome. I don't care. I'm sick of hearing it. And it's every single year. It's next year. Oh, look out. Next year, this, next year, that. Well, this was this year, and the same result happened. No championship. And that's, that's period. That's the coaching. That's on the coaching. You have to get a team over the hump. You have to have a team ready to play. You have to get a team to where they can win a game like that. And they haven't. They're playing, like I said, for, 6 straight seasons now, 500 football in November and December. Not going to do it. Not going to win you a championship, period. So, D overall. There you go.
Well, I said coming into this game when I did the preview that if Marshall doesn't win this game, their season would basically be a wash.
It's
and
a flop.
I feel that way.
Yes.
All it does, all those wins accounted for was, giving some joy to the fan base on a week-to-week basis because they just kept winning. They kept climbing the polls. They looked good. They were, getting their names mentioned and here and there. And Grant Wells was looking great. And the offensive line looks dominant. The defense is great, and all this stuff. But ultimately it ends in a 2-game losing streak, a loss in the conference championship game. And now you're going to play on a Christmas Day bowl game against Buffalo, a team out of the MAC that Marshall at some point, it's been a while now, but they were well above head and shoulders above a Buffalo program. And now Buffalo has been really good for the last number of years. So we'll see how that matchup goes. But look, this one's over with. Sucks. Moving on. I don't want to talk about it anymore. I don't want to dwell on it. And I'm right along the lines with Trace. I don't want to hear about next year. When is next year finally going to be this year? At some point, the folks that keep boasting next year have to stop saying next year.
How about this year? How about this year for once?
Your year has to come. It has to happen. It can't always be perpetually next year. But look, the last thing we're going to do on this recap is Steven's been listening intently over there. He hasn't said a word, and I know he watched the game. We were tweeting or texting back and forth kind of during the game here and there and whatnot. But Steven, from I don't want to say an outsider's point of view, because you're pretty close to the program, as close as we are, because you follow, along with the herd and the toppers, just like we do. I mean, what is your take from this overall thing? Like, the game obviously wasn't what we thought it was going to be. The effort wasn't what we thought it was going to be. But from a guy who really doesn't have a dog in the fight, so to speak, what does this say to you about Marshall and where they kind of stand in Conference USA amongst everybody else?
It's crazy that at the beginning of the season, I was trumping hard for Marshall. Their defense impressed me. Grant Wells and their offense impressed me. I was just thinking this is a top 10, top 15 team. I thought if they had played a BYU like we did, they would have gave them a game. If they matched up with Coastal Carolina, that would have been an awesome game. And then it kind of seemed as the season progressed, I don't know if teams were figuring out Grant Wells or just the offensive game plan or what, but those last 2 games, he looked like the freshman quarterback that you would have expected to see in the first couple games. But he didn't have that pressure on his shoulders. And then when the pressure was there, he kind of crumbled. He had some bad breaks and tips in the Rice game. And then the UAB game, it was not good. And I think I said this in our group message. He kind of turned into Piggy T those last couple weeks. He made bad decisions. The offense wasn't moving. The offense wasn't putting up points. The defense was out there way too long. It really almost seemed like our scripts kind of flipped on the season. Western started out kind of rough those first 4 or 5 games and then ended on a winning streak, putting up some points finally. The defense was doing all they could to keep us in games at the beginning of the season. Finally, the offense started scoring some points and winning some games. It almost seems like it kind of flipped. Your offense just quit clicking and quit putting up points, and your defense just, sorry for them out there 40-plus minutes. That's rough. But I feel the pain. I watched a lot of that this season, I feel like. And I think looking forward, the state of the program, it's a tough decision. And I hear Trace's frustration. I've heard it every year. I heard it when Bill Legg was the offensive coordinator. I think it's going to be really telling what decision they make in June, July when the calendar flips over. And I say it because anytime Western has had rough seasons. The second season with Mike Sanford, 3-win season. Todd Stewart, the fan base was upset. Pressure was being applied. Donors were going to affect. They weren't going to donate. They were going to stop showing to games, whatever. So Todd Stewart had to pull that trigger. Sanford gone. In comes Helton. Even this year, you see our offensive output wasn't what we expected to be. That's the reason why we brought in this staff, was to put points on the board. I think we were averaging 18 points per game at one point. You see that there's been pressure applied. All of a sudden, we've made a kind of a big name splash hire, repositioning Brian Ellis, and the goal is we're going to get back to where we were, scoring 30, 40 points per game. I've said it for a long time that you've got to score 30 points per game in this conference to be competitive. Our defense is where it needs to be, has been where it needs to be, but offensively we have to do more. And I think Marshall's kind of at that toeing that line of they've got to make a decision of they know what they have right now. They kind of know where the ceiling is. They know they're going to get 7-8 wins in a bowl game. But if they want to break through to the next level of success that they've enjoyed many times in the past, I think there has to be a change. There has to be a shakeup in the ranks. I would say that starts at the top. That has to start with Doc and some of the coordinators to put up better game plans on a week-to-week basis. And that the 13 and 14 stat in November, December, that's eye-opening. That's not championship football. You got to the championship game, but choked it away in your home field. That's not a good feeling. So I think there almost has to be a change. I'm not certain that there will be a change. I'm sure that's going to be a tough decision for the people in those positions. But from this perspective, I think a change kind of has to be made. I think there has to be new life brought into that program to bring some energy and some just renewed support from the fan base, because it seems like a lot of the fan base is just bitter and sour right now.
Well, here's the thing. Marshall's fan base seems to be literally divided by eras. You have these Marshall Mac era fans that are now, older and guys like me, that's the time of, I'm 40 and that's the time I was in college, right? It was during the Mac type era for Marshall. And you have those guys that want to hold on to any part of that to recapture that magic. Whether it's a coach, whether it's a philosophy, whatever it is, somebody that has the title of the program, that kind of seems to be who they want to keep capturing and bringing in. And the game is just not the same as it was 20 years ago. It's just not. You're not going to find a guy that's going to come and stay at your program for 8 years. He's going to win 10 or 11 ball games a year, and you're not going to expect somebody to come and hire him away. That's not the recipe. Bob Pruitt was a Marshall alum, right? He played there. So he stayed there, and he had bigger job offers, and he didn't take them. And now we're not in that situation to where we see G5s do that. The recipe, like I said on Twitter the other day, somebody asked me, well, who do you think Marshall might go after? Or, who are you, or what do you think we can afford, or can we buy him out? I'm like, there's no buyout. Doc Holliday's contract is going to expire at the end of the fiscal year in the state of West Virginia. He's not on a contract, essentially. His contract is done this season after this bowl game is over. So who's he coaching? There's no football team to coach, right? You got spring ball, but you can't go into spring ball with a coach whose contract expires in June. That's not going to happen. So you have to see some decisions made. And I've seen other people on the social media say, well, also Mike Hamrick's contract is up this year. So Marshall may be in the market for an athletic director too. I don't know that that's the case or not, but I've seen some folks say, yeah, he doesn't have a contract either. So are we looking at a scenario to where they both kind of retire and move along together, or, at this time? Or does Mike Hamrick stick around to get another contract, hire another coach? Nobody really knows what's going to happen. But I feel like right now, until it is embraced that the way that you have to be successful in the G5 in this day and age, which is you hire a guy, if he does really well for 2 or 3 years, wins you a title, and you sign him to a big extension, you sign him to an extension with a big, huge buyout. So when somebody comes to hire him away, You have a big buyout coming your way that you can use to hire your next coach. That's the recipe. That's what you do. And I believe I almost tweeted that exact same thing. That's the recipe, right? The guy from Coastal Carolina just signed a big 7-year contract with a big buyout. Do you have any idea? Do you think for 1 second, if Coastal Carolina goes 11-0 or 10-2 or whatever next year, wins the Sun Belt again, that he's not going to be having big schools coming to his door to hire him away? You better believe it. And
Lane Kiffin had a 10-year deal with FAU. Did you actually think he's going to stay at FAU for 10 years?
Not for 1 second did I think he was going to be there for, not for one, but boy, those guys in Boca sure thought he was going to be there for a decade.
I won't guarantee it.
Not at all. But what do? You take that buyout and you use that and you go hire your next coach, which happens to be Willie Taggart. And we'll see what Willie can do down there. They were a game away from the title game this year. We'll see how it goes. But that's the recipe. So Trace, I know your thoughts, but look, take your own emotion out of it. We know your feelings on Holiday. We know you want to move away from, or not move away, but like close this chapter and open a new chapter. Let somebody else run the program. I asked the question, is Doc on the clock? Now, legitimately, do you feel like he is on the hot seat? He's on the clock. The hot seat is done. He's got no contract right now. I mean, can a bowl win get him an extension?
I mean, based on the recent trend of Marshall football, probably. I mean, here's the thing. Like, he's not on the hot seat because of like people. There's a difference. The hot seat, it's a little bit of a gray area. He's not on the hot seat because of his lack of success or his, shortcomings or whatever, or like if anybody thinks that he's going to be fired. He's on the hot seat because his contract's up. Like,
right, that's what I mean.
Yeah, there's a difference. Like it's not like a Mark Schneider who loses every year. He's on the hot seat. That's not the same thing. But like the thing with Doc is that I was going to bring this up earlier. A couple points. It's not like he hasn't had a chance. He's coached 11 seasons at Marshall.
Right.
Like this is 11 years. This guy has been the coach, and he's got one championship. 11 years. And like, I don't care if you win 60 or 62% of your games. You have one championship. It's not like he hasn't had a fair shake at it. He's been here. Isn't he like the longest tenured head coach in Marshall history or something like that?
I couldn't tell you that. He has, in a decade. But in a decade of realigned Conference USA football where other young programs have been brought in, you have an established program like Marshall who's been successful across multiple eras, across multiple conferences and divisions, you can't just say, well, I'm good with one title in 11 years when other schools have won multiple, right? Okay. UAB in 4 years of resurgence has won 2.
Yeah.
And they won 1. Well, that was it. This is their second ever, and they've won 2 in the last 4 years or 3 years or whatever. You can't be okay with that. Again, I'm not pounding, like this is not the beat down Doc hour, but if you're okay with one title in 11 years, what is your expectation? If you're going to say we play for championships, then you have to play for championships, right? Year in and year out.
Here's the thing. I was literally going to ask this question. What is the standard at Marshall football? What is the standard for Marshall football? What do they expect?
Well, if you talk to those in leadership positions, they'll tell you, we want to play for a conference championship every year. We want to compete for a New Year's Six Bowl, yada, yada, yada. That's what they'll say.
The answer is yes. The answer is, the answer to that question is you want to win a conference championship. That's what your standard is. What happens when they're not meeting that standard? Then what else is there to say? You're not meeting the standard. What else? I don't care if you win 8 games a year. Who cares? Like the standard at Marshall is not to win 8 games a year. The standard is not to play in a bowl game. The standard is not to win a bowl game. The standard is to win conference championships. So like, if your head coach is not meeting that standard, what more can you say than it's time to move on? He's had 11 years to get it figured out. 11 years. What do they say? It's usually like 3 years it takes to build a program or so. He's had over 3 times 3 years. I mean, like, what more can you do? I mean, I don't see how you can give how much more time do you need? He's 63 years old. He's coached 11 years. I mean, it'd be one thing if he was within his first 4 or 5 years, because like he, initially was. We're in 11 years now, and you're not meeting the standard. You met it one time in 11 years. I mean, I don't see how anybody can argue with that. Period.
Right. And look, and I'm not saying that Doc Holliday isn't a great coach in other aspects. Like he's
consistent.
I mean, like he's preparing his players for life after football, and he's got a commitment to these guys getting their degrees and things like that's a completely different argument. And it's something that shouldn't be taken lightly, but he's not being paid to get guys degrees, right? No. He's getting paid to win football games. I mean, that's what I think a football coach is supposed to do. Now, yes, you want your guys getting degrees. Yes, you want them graduating. Yes, you want them going on and being successful. I get all that. But at the end of the day, if your mantra is we play for championships and you're not technically, I guess they did play for a championship, but they didn't win it. So do you want to just play for them or do you want to win championships? That's the difference. And I think you're right. He's had long enough time that he should have built a dominant reloading program at Marshall in 11 years. You should be reloading every year. You should go in every year being the favorite in the East, and it's not even close, and it doesn't matter who anybody else hires. They should have to go through Huntington. The championship road should go through Huntington after 11 years. It should just be that way.
And for God's sake, please don't even bring up the next year. I don't want to hear a single word about next year. I don't care. Like, I don't care if Grant Wells is back. I don't care if most of the O-line's back. I don't care if Brenton Knox is back. I don't care about any of that. I don't want to hear next year. The only time I'm going to care about next year is when they win the championship the year before. I don't care about next year. Win the championship. That's it.
That's fair. That's fair. You want to talk about next year when you're talking about a repeat. But look, so I'm curious to see how it plays out. I mean, Christmas Day could be a turning point day for Marshall football. It could be the day that Marshall wins a bowl game or loses a bowl game. Doc Holliday announces his retirement, whatever, we don't know. But I've got a feeling that if Doc doesn't return, Herd fans, a lot of them think there's going to be this big national search and they're going to go out and try to find some young, somebody that will excite the fan base. And I don't feel that it's that way. I feel like the next Marshall head coach is already on the staff. And I think a lot of folks already probably know who it is. And I think I alluded to it earlier when we talk about Marshall, the divide in Marshall fan base, that people want to hang on to the Mac era type stuff. So take that for what it's worth. It's just my gut feeling.
I'm going to add a couple more things to this. This is regarding the people that want to keep Doc around. Okay. Like it's not even the fact that I necessarily agree or disagree with them that much, but like it's the mindset of why they want to keep him around. Is that what I don't understand is the argument you always hear is he's a consistent winner. He's consistent, stability, whatever. You can't be afraid to change. Like if you're afraid to change, then you're going to get left behind. You can't be afraid to change. And then they're worried about, what if somebody comes in and isn't as good and ruins the program? You can't be afraid of that either. I remember someone brought up Southern Miss a few years ago. Southern Miss made a coaching change, and they went down into the tank. Well, that's just one example. There's a lot. I can guarantee you I could find more examples of teams that have decided to move on and have better prospered than the coach beforehand. So you can't be afraid to change like that. And it's not even to say that Doc's been a bad coach, because clearly he's not a bad coach. He's a good coach. He's won a lot of games or whatever, but like he's not a great coach. That's the problem. He's not a championship winning coach. He got one championship because he had the statistically all-time greatest quarterback in Marshall history. I mean, he's not
the greatest defense
and one of the greatest defenses in the history of the program. So, I mean, he's not a bad coach. He's a good coach. He's consistent. He built a stable program. Kudos to him for all that. But that's not the standard. So,
well, let me ask you a question to go along with that argument. If 8 wins in a bowl game is what you're okay with, and you make a coaching change, and for a couple of years you go 6-6 and get a bowl game, does it really matter?
No,
it doesn't.
It doesn't.
It doesn't matter. 8 wins versus 6 wins doesn't matter because you're going to get a freaking bowl game, and it's not like it's the difference between the Peach Bowl or the freaking Cure Bowl, okay?
Right.
It's the difference between the Gasparilla Bowl and the Cure Bowl. It's not that big of a deal.
Yep.
But if ultimately that means you go 6-6, 6-6, and then freaking 10-1, 10-1, 10-1, and then you're rinse and repeating because you got a coach that somebody wants and you get a big buyout and you can go buy the next hot young guy to ignite your program, then that's what you do. That's what you do. That's the recipe. All right, look, the last thing we can do here is we can talk about Marshall's bowl announcement was made just before we started recording. The Herd's going to the Camellia Bowl to play Buffalo on Christmas Day. And, you know, I don't know that we'll be able to get a bowl preview episode out. It's Christmas week. It's a lot going on. I still got to work. Everybody's got their stuff going on. But look, based on what we've seen the last couple of games with teams loading up to run against Marshall and forcing them to beat them that way, I don't know that I necessarily like this. What are you showing me there?
Nothing. Keep going.
Trace, what are you showing me on the phone?
It was this funny tweet somebody put on here.
Oh, I can't read it. I just thought it was the Camellia Bowl, like
No,
logo.
it is, but it says something funny under it.
But anyway, based on what we've seen the last couple of games, teams loading up and committing to the run to beat Marshall, and they've been successful 2-0, having to face Buffalo with one of the most dangerous running backs and one of the best offensive lines, not only in the G5, but in college football, is got to be a scary proposition for the Herd. Trace, come in here real quick. Steve, I'll get your take on this too, and then we'll get out of here because I got to go to work early, and it sucks. Trace, what do you think? Knee-jerk reaction with the Camellia Bowl invite? Herd in Buffalo.
Well, it's not exactly the most intriguing matchup you could have got. I mean, I feel like there's not really going to be anybody in the fan base, excluding, you know, the people that are always happy, that are going to be happy with the game. I mean, it's a Christmas Day game, and it's like, you know, it's in Alabama. There's not going to be anybody there, and it's like against a MAC team that, like, I know Marshall fans are just going to think, oh, well, Buffalo sucks because they sucked 20 years ago. That's not the case. They don't suck. They have one of the most electric running backs in the country, a guy that ran for over 400 yards and 8 touchdowns in a game a few weeks ago. I mean, what? Now, I did see somebody tweet that he got dinged up a little bit, I think, in that Ball State game, so they don't know, like, his status for this game. But, like, if this guy plays and he's healthy, coupled with that offensive line, especially after what UAB just did to Marshall, that's going to be dicey. I'll just tell you right now. But I mean, it's Marshall. I mean, I don't really know much about Buffalo. I know they had a good year and they lost a close game in the MAC championship game. So like they're a good team, but like it's not. That's what I tweeted this morning. This is the least excited I've ever been on a bowl game destination, like Discovery Day for Marshall. You know, this is the least excited I've ever been to find out where Marshall's going to play in a bowl because, you know, it's just such a deflating thing with the last 2 games of how they've been. So, I mean, it's just disappointing. The bowl game might be a good game. They might win. That's fine and dandy, but that's not the standard either. So, you know what? It is what it is, but like they just have to. I don't know. I don't even know what to think about it yet, honestly.
Yeah, this is tough, but this is not the Buffalo of yesteryear that Herd fans are used to playing on their homecoming match or anything. Let me tell you something. Their head coach is one of the top young coaches in the G5. It would not surprise me if he's got guys knocking down his door during the coaching carousel. I've seen his name tossed around a couple times for other jobs. So, look, this is a team you should be worried about, period. This is not one that is going to come lightly. The Herd can definitely go win this game. But Grant Wells is going to have to play a lot better. Brendan Knox is going to have a big game, and they're going to have to continue to play good defense. Also, you're not going to be able to have plus 23 or minus 23 in time of possession margin. I mean, look, Marshall can win. They've got to just get back to being the Marshall that we saw the first 7 games of the season, period, point blank. Steve, I see you got the real rock star of the Moffitt household sitting on your lap, just like I have from time to time. This is Stephen, and maybe a little bit of side commentary from Jet Moffitt. But look, it's the Herd in Buffalo. Stephen and I will get lucky enough to get our schedules to line up to bring you a bowl preview for the Toppers in Georgia State here later in the week. So we will, get you that. But look, what do you think? I mean, do you know anything about Buffalo? I mean, I think we all saw that running back rip off almost 400 yards and 8 touchdowns or something in that game. Buffalo and the Herd. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obvious which way they're going to lean once they start digging into film. I mean, I'm not sure how much they'll dig into the wins other than knowing what to expect from Marshall.
Yeah.
But when they start peeling back the layers of, okay, what were the teams doing that beat them? They're going to run the ball a lot. And, you talked about Buffalo had a solid good young head coach. They also just had a good, solid young basketball coach that they lost to Alabama this year. So their AD is kind of doing kind of what you're saying Marshall needs to do, hire a good up-and-comer, have some successful seasons. They lose them, hire the next guy. I think that's kind of exactly the formula that they're using. So the game, I don't know what to expect. Christmas Day, obviously that's less than desirable. At one point a few weeks ago, I was here in Western to the Camellia Bowl. Thank goodness we won some ball games and found something a little better than that, at least on paper, kind of a revenge game for us. We'll talk about that in our preview. But the Buffalo game is going to be tough. And if y'all end the season on a 3-game losing streak after the 7-0 and ranked start and just high expectations, I don't know. I think it's going to be a tough game. That's for sure. I couldn't call it right now which way it's going to go. I don't know that much about Buffalo, but knowing that they can rush the ball a lot and they lean that way, I wouldn't be very optimistic about it. That's for sure.
I will say this. I didn't expect Ball State to go in and beat Buffalo for the MAC championship. I thought this was Buffalo's game to absolutely lose. So, Trace, you might be right. If Patterson got dinged up and had to go out early, that probably weighed heavily into how Buffalo was able to run their offense. But if he's healthy and he's a go, man, this is going to be a tough one. This is going to be a real tough one. Marshall hasn't had success against the run lately, and teams that are committed to it, 30, 40 carries, they're having success against Marshall. So we'll see how it goes. Look, let's get some final thoughts in here, Trace, and then we'll get out of here. What do you got?
Well, go Herd, I guess. Win the Camellia Bowl, that kind of thing. I mean, I don't know. I feel like we've said it all. Like, I feel like there's nothing else that we can even say. I mean, we're at a crossroads here for Marshall as a program and the coaching situation and everything. It's just getting time to really, really figure it out. I mean, I think everybody knew that this was going to be this, a season that could be Doc's last season based on the contract situation and everything. And I said, this is not a new opinion. This is not just a knee-jerk reaction take or anything. I said from the start, from last season's end, all through the offseason, if he didn't win the conference this year, he's got to go. That's what I said. And I'm sticking by it. I don't care if he got there. I don't care if you were 7-0. I don't care if you got ranked number 15 in the country. I don't care about any of that. I'd rather him start 0-2 or 0-3 and then go on a tear and win the conference. I don't give a crap if you start 7-0 and are ranked. Who cares? Like, that doesn't matter. I mean, what matters is rings and championships, rings, bowl games. That's what matters. So, you know what? I mean, what else? What more? If they're not getting there, then what else do you want? What else can you have? I mean, you got to have more than just bowl games. I mean, this isn't me saying that I think Doc's a bad coach, because everybody should know that he's not a bad coach. I mean, he's won a lot of games, done a lot of good for Marshall, I mean, but at the end of the day, if you have a standard in place of what you expect to have, and you've only met that one time in 11 years. 11 years. It's not like it's like you said. It's not just like it's been 3 or 4. It's been 11. So it's plenty of time to get to a championship level consistently, and he hasn't done that. So that's an indictment on him. Sorry, that's just the way it is. So you know what? Hopefully Marshall can pull out this bowl win. That'd be cool. But if it shouldn't, it's not going to really affect much. I mean, if they win, fine. If they lose, fine. I mean, that's kind of what this bowl game is right now.
Well, I'm a little bit different, but I'll save that for my final thoughts. Stephen, I know you've been patient for most of this hour and 7 minutes we've been yammering on. And I know we're going to be podcasting in a couple of days, but do you have any, parting thoughts as we head out and close out the regular season in Conference USA?
Yeah, I'd say, It sounds like real soon Marshall fans are going to start sounding like Western fans of yesteryear and UK fans. Is it basketball season yet?
Plenty of them already are doing that.
Yeah.
Because they've got another good team over there on the hardwood that should be fun, some fun matchup for us. And obviously the football side of things didn't pan out how they'd like, and Western basketball looks good and Marshall basketball looks good. So those should be some exciting matchups next month. So really excited for that. And hopefully bowl season is fruitful for both of us. Hopefully we both grab a couple wins, and just look forward to next year. We don't want to say that, but look forward to next year because I am. I don't know about herd football, but WKU football is looking forward to next year. We shaking some things up.
Yeah, that's true. We'll talk about that too when Steven and I preview the bowl game. We'll talk about some other little news that's surrounding the program, stuff that Topper fans should be excited for because I know we are. Our prospects of what and the outlook for 2021 at this point is already looking more positive, and we'll only see how much into that, the needle pushes towards positive for the Tops. But look, for me, it's a rough week. It was a rough game. It was hard to watch, and it was certainly a terrible result that nobody wanted to see. That where's Kelly Green? But it happened nonetheless. I will say that it doesn't matter wins or losses, big games, small games. Big wins, heartbreaking, gut-wrenching losses, it doesn't matter. We still ride with the herd. We still ride with the Toppers, and we always will. We'll never turn our back on these players. I will not, ever just demean or put them down. What we do, but what we will do is be honest in our analysis and what we think happens. And if that's not something you want to hear, then, well, you just don't want to hear our honest opinion. We can't call it sunshine and rainbows when it's not sunshine and rainbows. And this game was not sunshine and rainbows. Last thing I'll say about Doc Holliday's situation is, to me, after Marshall beat a top 25 team at home and we didn't hear even a rumor of an extension, was a little bit telling. When Marshall climbed to number 15 in the polls and we didn't even hear a rumor of an extension, was a little bit telling. And now that we're seeing Marshall kind of slide backwards a little bit, a 2-game losing streak, bad loss in the Conference USA title game, we're not hearing any rumors of an extension. I kind of think the writing might be on the wall. I know he's not going to be fired. I just think Doc's going to have one more opportunity to get him a bowl win, leave Marshall on his own terms with a win in a bowl game. And if that happens, then it happens. But I just feel like probably Doc has made his own decision, and he's probably just going to walk away. Fitting for Doc Holliday to ride off into the sunset. But it's a terrible pun, but that might be exactly what happens. Merry Christmas to everybody. I hope everybody has a happy, healthy, safe week. Let's not be blinded by the fact that sports is a little bit of reprieve in a coronavirus season. A lot of folks will be without their families and won't be able to see them. And, we are no different. This Christmas for us is going to be just 3 of us for the first time in literally forever. So I wish everyone a happy, healthy, Merry Christmas. I hope Santa Claus brings you everything you asked for. And I really appreciate all the birthday wishes that went out to my youngster Cooper. He turned 9 yesterday, and he grows up more and more every single day. Appreciate everybody at least extending a happy birthday message to him. It's pretty awesome to think that 9 years ago I was still living in Huntington, and I was in Cabell Huntington Hospital while he was born. And the very next day, I told DJ Hunter this when he was on our show. I sat in the hospital room holding Cooper, watching the herd play FIU in the bowl game, and I watched Alex Bazzi actually absolutely annihilate T.Y. Hilton on a kickoff return. So it's just pretty cool tie for me and some of the guests that we've had on the show. So anyway, until next week, or actually until a couple of days when Steve and I are talking to you some Topper stuff, let's get out of here. Steve, Trace, take us out.
Go Herds.
Steve, finish us off.
Go Tops, go Mommy.
I forgot that. Go Tops, go Mommy. It's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. Later.